Worn down, broken, lost, a phantom hope to restore what was once great. Well, enough about Disney Star Wars. Let's talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Back when Disney bought Lucasfilms, they floated the idea of an Obi-Wan Kenobi film. It would be set in the time between episodes 3 and 4 and fill in the gaps of what Obi-Wan did while the Empire rose to power. It sounded like a good idea at the time. People had lots of criticisms for the prequels, but everybody loved Ewan McGregor. It would be fun to see what they would do with Obi, especially with all the changes made to the lore in the prequels. However, after Disney fumbled, dropped, and then nuked the ball with The Last Jedi, Solo, and Rise of Skywalker, the situation changed. The film was put on indefinite hiatus in early 2020, but then got resurrected as a 6-part TV miniseries. That probably sounded like a good idea at the time too, but history has shown that stretching short stories into longer stories results in lots of filler that ultimately doesn't matter and often buries the principal plot. That kind of feels like what's happening with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It's set 10 years after episode 3. We find Obi-Wan living out a shittier existence on Tatooine. He's broken, lost, haunted by his failure with Anakin. It's a stark contrast of the version of Obi-Wan shown in Star Wars Rebels. However, this version works better. This is a man who watched his entire world be destroyed by the Jedi he trained and had to fight to the death. He failed not only his student, but his master Qui-Gon Jinn. Now, as a result of his failure, the Jedi are all but extinct. No one goes through that and maintains a positive attitude. That would break you, and that's what we see here. A man devastated by his mistakes and wallowing in the grief and guilt. Exploring his journey back to hope would be one hell of a story. Unfortunately, that's not how the show starts. It starts with the scene from the Purge at the Jedi Temple, and it's an unfortunately timed scene because it's showing the younglings, the kids, being attacked by clone troopers, and this is just days after the school shooting in Uvalde. There's no way anyone would know that this would happen just days before the show debuted, but it did. Fortunately, none of the kids are killed on screen. However, it does set up the idea that some of the Padawans got away. Why show that scene? Well, that's because third sister Reva appears to be one of those kids. She seems to hate Obi-Wan for some reason. It's implied that he might have left her and the other kids, either knowingly or unknowingly, and it's a fine story for a secondary antagonist until we get to Darth Vader. However, a fair chunk of the first 2 episodes, about a third of both, are devoted to Reva and her hunt for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Why? We don't know who she is, and frankly, we're not here for her. That's not to say Moses Ingram isn't acting her ass off. She is, and doing a fine job of it. It's just that there's no stakes with her character because she's not the main attraction. We're here for the probably lore-breaking meeting of Obi-Wan and Vader, not some random angry lady. Her subplot is basically filler. If this were a film, she'd be there to get Kenobi to Vader, and then we get some quick backstory midway through the film about how she was one of the kids Kenobi left behind to go kill Anakin, or maybe she was one of the kids Anakin supposedly killed but actually didn't, and instead turned them against the Jedi. It'd be a real quick scene, and maybe result in a spin-off film about her origins or something. For whatever reason, they decided to add that to this show, and it's noticeably out of place. It doesn't slow the story down, the show's very well paced actually, but it does make you ask what this has to do with Obi-Wan Kenobi meeting Vader. Once we get through at Reva, we finally see Obi-Wan eking out his pathetic life while watching to see if Luke shows any signs of the Force, but Uncle Owen wants no part of that. This is setting up the scene in A New Hope where Owen shows contempt for Obi-Wan. He blames Obi for Anakin and wants Obi to stay away from Luke. However, Obi wants to train Luke if the boy shows any signs of the Force, which is fine, except that Obi seems to have abandoned using the Force. It's been so long that he struggles to use the Force later in the 2nd episode. So how is he supposed to train Luke? If ever there was a guarantee of creating another Vader, that would be it. Better yet, since Obi thinks the Jedi are finished, he says this to a Jedi who manages to find him and asks for help. What's the point of training Luke? Why would you train him if you think there's no hope? It's a strange choice for the writers to make. Obviously they're trying to match it up with The New Hope, but it would make more sense if Obi didn't want to train Luke at first and then changed his mind. There's also the pesky reason of why he wanted to train Luke in the first place, and they kind of changed that later in the show. As for the other twin, the show also introduces a young Leia Organa, and she takes up a fair amount of screen time as well. For a show titled Obi-Wan Kenobi, There sure are lots of pivots away from his story. This one is less of a problem in theory because it sets up how these two meet. In practice, however, it's a problem because how they meet makes no sense. Somehow, Reva discovers a connection between Bail Organa and Obi-Wan Kenobi, so she has bounty hunters kidnap the daughter of two of the most powerful politicians in the galaxy, assuming that this would bring Obi-Wan out of hiding. Or, Bail Organa could just send an army or mercenaries or both to get his kid, which he doesn't do out of fear that someone might discover who Leia actually is. This would make sense if her name were Leia Skywalker, but it's not. It's Leia Organa, and no one would know who she really is, which is proven by the original trilogy. No one, including Vader, her father, knows she's a Skywalker. There's no reason to request Obi go to rescue her other than to have them meet. It's even more bizarre when Bail Organa shows up at Obi's home on Tatooine and tells him exactly where Leia is. You traveled all the way from Alderaan to Tatooine to talk to Obi in person, instead of just doing what he said on the comm and getting someone who's fought in the last 10 years to do it instead. And by the way, when did Jimmy Smits become an old Chinese man? Did he have work done on his face? Was it by Madonna's plastic surgeon? Anyway, Bail's brilliant reasoning is that Obi-Wan owes it to Leia to rescue her, so he should abandon Luke, the poor boy being raised by moisture farmers in the middle of nowhere, to save the wealthy, bratty, bossy princess who could be rescued by literally anyone else in the galaxy. As for Leia, they do a decent job of making her bossy like she was in A New Hope, and unusually mature and smart for her age. It's implied that she might be using the Force to read people's minds, and then use that information to dissect them with withering retorts. It explains why people would listen to and follow her in just a few years. However, the kidnapping is just inexcusable. Not because of the random cameo by Flea, that was fine, but because of the grown men not being able to chase down a 10-year-old jogging through a forest. They're behind her like they're her dad going, "Oh, I'm gonna get you." At one point, Leia ducks under a branch, and the guy chasing, power walking behind her, pretends to get hit by a clearly visible branch that comes up to his nipples. Obviously, you can't have the little girl running in a real forest at full speed, but come on. So they kidnap her and take her to planet Blade Runner, also known as Daiyu. Obi decides to go and rescue her on Daiyu, and there's yet another moment of filler, this time with a guy named Haja Estri, who pretends to be a Jedi so he can help people for the credits. There's really no reason for this character other than the comic relief, but the real problem is that Haja breaks the rules of the world the writers just set up. In the first episode, the Inquisitors arrive on Tatooine because they're hunting a Jedi, not Obi, but someone else. Everyone knows what the Inquisitors do, and it terrifies them. They hunt down Jedi, torture and maim anyone who gets in their way, and leaves the bodies of the Jedi they've killed as a warning. This would scare off actual Jedi, so who in the galaxy would be stupid enough to pretend to be a Jedi? Haja Estri, apparently. This kind of character would make sense before the Empire took over, but not at the height of its power where they're sending Inquisitors out to the Outer Rim to pick off straggling Jedi survivors. It's just silly. However, he does serve a purpose. He tells Obi how to find Leia. Obi finds her, but as they try to flee, Reva finds out he got away, and has Flea issue an excommunicado order for all the bounty hunters to go after Obi. All this is meant to get to the moment where Obi-Wan has to use the Force to save Leia when she jumps off a building, gaining Leia's trust and linking Obi back to the Force. It's predictable, but it works. The best and worst moment of the show so far is the big reveal about Anakin being alive. Reva tracks Obi and Leia to a commercial hangar where they plan to leave Daiyu, and Reva reveals that it's not just that she has a personal vendetta against Obi, but that she's working for someone who wants to meet him, Darth Vader. And the look on Obi's face says it all. Ewan McGregor just nails this moment of profound realization that Anakin isn't dead, and all the joy, guilt, and horror that fills him just sinks in. No words needed. His face says it all. The anguish, the fear, what it means for him, for Luke, for Leia, the shadow of hope that Padme was right, that there's still some good in Anakin, and that well of sorrow knowing that Anakin murdered scores of Jedi, including kids, and that he's capable of far worse. All in this man's face. Absolute perfection, ruined by one pesky fact. Vader is the Emperor's right-hand man, known throughout the entire galaxy, so how the hell wouldn't Obi-Wan already know Vader was alive? Let's set aside how Reva knows that Vader is Anakin. Maybe he told her. It doesn't make much sense, but just let that go for now. How does Obi-Wan not know about Vader when Vader has been active this entire time? There's no way he wouldn't know about Vader. None. Unless the new lords that Vader has been hiding in the wings for the last 10 years, except for that time immediately after he discovered white men can't jump, got his gams cut off, got new ones, and was standing on the bridge of a Star Destroyer a day later in front of scores of people. The moment of Obi-Wan's realization is awesome, but it needs to make sense, and this just doesn't. There's no reason he wouldn't know Anakin was alive, given that he knows about the Inquisitors and the hunting of Jedi, all of which are probably rare out on the Rim. This also goes back to this pesky point about Luke's training. In A New Hope, the purpose of training Luke was so that he could kill Vader. However, if Obi doesn't know that Vader is still alive, why would he want to train Luke? There would be no point in teaching the boy how to use the Force, since it would make him a target. This kind of mistake might be the result of the writers trying to take what was originally a film script and pad it out for another 4 hours to make a 6-part show. They've got to add something in to make it work. A villain who will likely turn back to the good side, and a sassy Princess Leia seems to be what they came up with. Fortunately, it's mostly good writing and acting. Had the sequels not come out, the show would be praised as an improvement over the prequels, but it's still clunky. The one untouchable plus is John Williams' theme for Obi-Wan. It's interesting because it has hints of the Jedi theme, but it's missing notes, so it doesn't complete the motif, which is a very clever play on the broken Obi-Wan concept. Overall, the show is good. It's got some questionable moments, but it's enjoyable. However, it is still Disney Star Wars, so if it starts to feel too good, you know the folks running Lucasfilms will find a way to ruin it or let someone else ruin it. So far, the show is good, but there are still 4 more episodes to go. So much time, so many things to screw. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.